Welcome to the Bold Claims Podcast with your hosts, Matt Danskin, Daniel Robosky, and Taylor Ammons.
Welcome to the Bold Claims Podcast, brought to you by the Building Experts Institute. My name is Matt Danskin. Join me and our fellow experts as we discuss some of the top issues facing roofing and restoration contractors. Today, we're going to talk about the lifetime shingle. We're going to talk about the attempt to repair trap that's being set for contractors, as well as one of my favorite tools that I've brought along for the show. Let's get started. Kind of going back into that conversation, talking about the legitimate claims get paid. Most roofs are repairable. What is your thought? As a roofing contractor, are most roofs repairable in your experience?
So I would say that most roofs are repairable in a sense that you can actually go through and perform the repair. But what I see is newer roofs, couple years old, that are still bonded really well tend to cause damage to some of the surrounding materials when you're going to manipulate that. And then on some of the older roofs is, you can get in and you can get your tools in to perform or attempt to perform a repair, but what we notice is a lot of those surrounding materials end up being damaged and compromised as well. So, in the sense of, can I perform a repair? Sure. But there's typically a smaller window where that repair, in my experience, can be performed successfully without causing additional damage to surrounding materials that domino that repair into a much larger section of the roof. It's not so
stuck together that it's tearing apart, and it's also not so brittle that it's tearing apart.
Correct. Yeah. And there's obviously a lot of external circumstances that come into play as well. What are the temperatures outside? What section of the roof are we on, and things like that. Even what type of material it is, because I know some of the Duragrip that GAF's doing right now, when that shingle bonds, it's bonded.
Right.
And once you start to go in and try and break those seals, then mat transfer, shingle tears, things like that, we see all the time.
I wonder how much of that, shingle manufacturers are considering, let's make this so that you can't pull it apart, which does give you a more complete roofing system.
Mm-hmm.
Water's not going to get in, but also it means, hey, instead of them buying one package of shingles from us to repair this, they're buying a full roof.
It's like those bun coffee makers from the 80s, right? If you bought a bun coffee maker, it still works today.
Yeah.
If you bought a Proctor
ago.
Select or whatever last year at Walmart, you're probably replacing it, right? The idea of building something that stands the test of time was really good, 20, 30 years ago. But now, the way manufacturers work now and they're how they get their profit, they have to make something that has a shelf life to it.
Yeah. I think I don't know who does the lobbying for repairability and with the building code, but I feel like I would say most roofs are not repairable from a technical standpoint. Does it line up with what the code is saying to do? And almost never does it. There's always this loophole of you're not allowed to mix these, or our underlayment has to lap over or whatever, which it is the law. So you, as a contractor, you do have to follow it, but at the same time, a lot of it's kind of on technicality of you should be able to at least perform if you can get this shingle apart, if it's in that window where it's not too stuck together, it's not too brittle.
Yep.
You can swap out shingles. You can physically do it, but it's probably violating code or manufacturer guideline in some way. So I see a lot of people arguing about that whole situation.
Yeah, but also our industry is dominated heavily by insurance claims and things like that, right? So repairability when it comes to an insurance claim is a lot more complex than the repairability from a functional standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And so when guys are going out and trying to get roofs bought because that's how they pay their bills, right? Then all of a sudden a roof that is sure repairable or could be repairable they're pushing for a full replacement because they're going to get a larger commission on that and whatever. And I'm not knocking it, right? Like, they need to go out and they need to be able to pay their bills. And the idea of indemnifying and insured appropriately garners the thought process for a full replacement, right? Because if I'm paying for an insurance policy, I want to be put back the way that it was before this peril happened, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to put Bondo on a 69 Camaro, right, and then expect it to have the same value. I want to do the same thing. I want to have a full replacement on a roof. But to your point, if it doesn't meet code or city ordinance or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's a claimable event. And that's where a lot of guys get their wires crossed a little bit is, oh, well, it should be covered because it's code, or it should be covered. Not necessarily. There has to be a peril on the front end for it to be covered. Yeah. It's not saying it's not repairable. It's not saying that it doesn't warrant a full roof replacement. It just might not warrant a full replacement per the policy and what they consider covered perils. And those get mixed up a lot.
Mm-hmm. I see it both ways, though, because you've got the contractors that go, hey, you know, we need to repair this, and, you know, because of this technicality, we need to replace it. And then they go, well, there's no coverage, right? Like, there's a lot of different reasons there could not be coverage. But you see the other side of it where it is damaged by wind, right? And there's shingles missing or creased or mat transfer or whatever damage is there, and it was caused by wind, which is a covered peril in this situation. And then adjusters will go, well, we only owe for repairing damaged material. Right. Yeah. And they get stuck in that mindset of like, oh no, this is what I was told, is that we only owe for this thing, and not understanding how that it.
Well, most of the time the adjusters in the field don't get to review the full policy.
Yeah.
They'll get an excerpt, right? So like if I'm
I've talked to a lot of adjusters that like, nope.
At best, a lot of times they'll get an excerpt. They'll be like, hey, Taylor, you go inspect, you know, Mrs. Smith's house on Main Street. We know that it's a wind claim. Here's our one little bullet of the wind claim portion of the policy, and that's all he sees. It doesn't, you know, there's times where they don't even include endorsements that are state specific, because certain states have different endorsements, but they just get a piece, and they do that on purpose. Like it's very intentional for them to do it that way.
Yeah. Or even when the excerpts that they get are more focused around how they're not going to be paying for it, or how there's not coverage, to where it almost sets the intention on the front end when that adjuster goes out that, you know, he's looking for these reasons to not pay this claim. You know, we had one fairly recently that was a reinspection with old Big Red, and when the adjuster got out of the car for the first 10 minutes, he did nothing but explain why it was ultimately probably not going to be covered. But he hadn't even done his inspection yet. You know, we already had a third-party forensic test that confirmed there was hail damage to the structure. And his first initial 10 minutes was all about the ways he was probably, you know, not going to be opening up any additional coverage on this, and that was short-lived.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the whole aspect of like legitimate claims will get paid. They will get paid if they're held accountable, if you work through whatever, you know, dispute resolution, you know, things you have to do. But legitimate claims are not necessarily paid right out of the gate.
Oh yeah,
because they're legitimate.
Yeah, like I would even argue that they are not.
I would even argue that they're not. You know, is that
there was a study a couple years ago before, I think it was before Ian hit, and it was, you know, my numbers might be off a little bit, but it was like 85 or 86% of claims are denied or undervalued the first iteration. They're playing against ignorance, right? It's
correct.
But homeowner has the most power in that scenario than anybody, but they don't know. They're not interpreting their policy, so it takes a public adjuster or a lawyer to come in. And in a lot of cases, for years, it was contractors acting in that capacity, which, you know, what started the UPPA stuff, which circles us back to the repairability conversation of like, if you're not educating your sales guys, your crew guys, your whoever, if you weren't educated on the front end, you should be looking to gain and find avenues to educate yourself in those areas so that you can have an educated conversation about the repairability of things, right? Because how many times have you seen YouTube videos and stuff where guys are just getting up there and, you know, with a crowbar and flipping shingles back going, see, it's not, you can't repair this.
Yeah. And well, and we're going to get into that later. So
education is important is my whole point.
Well, and one thing that really irritates me that I see a lot is contractors, particularly like insurance restoration contractors, will be heavy on the repairability when it's a claim. But if they have a homeowner that has a retail project, all of a sudden that material is a lot more, it's a lot more pliable and a lot more able to be worked with than it was when they found out there was an insurance claim, or when they found out that it was, an ACV policy, or that it was one of the carriers that's a little more difficult to work with, but the homeowner's open to retail. All of a sudden that roof becomes more repairable than it was when you thought somebody else was footing that bill, and that really irritates me.
Well, I think that's the rub of it. I think there is a little bit of wiggle room in that, if like I got a dent in my car, I got a deer ran into the side of my car, right, and my insurance policy owes to bring me back to my pre-loss condition and fix that that dent on my car. But I could choose to not pay my deductible and pull it out and go spray paint it in my garage and, do whatever I want. But car repairs are not mandated by, building officials, right? I don't know what governance there is over car repairs, but I don't think that there's, the same type of standards. As long as the vehicle is not unsafe or something.
Right, I believe that.
The insurance commissioner dictates some of that stuff, but it does not get nearly as granular as they get with property insurance stuff. Because to your point, the building codes and things like that don't exist. So.
Yep. Yeah, well, and then the other thing, too, if there's a mortgage on the house where somebody else has a financial interest in that property, they want to make sure that work gets done properly and protects from any further issues against that asset.
And I'll tell you, just from a PA's perspective, mortgage companies are just as much of a hindrance as carriers are sometimes. I've had claims go through where the lender wants to have some sort of responsibility over whether payments get made to contractors and things like that, and it's like,
you really don't know what you're looking at.
They're just looking at they're looking at especially on a home that's $400,000 or $500,000, all of a sudden they're getting $120,000 check, 20%, 25% of the value of the entity that they own a part of. They have an interest, and I get it, but most of the time when they get involved, it ends up making the whole situation muddier and more complex to deal with.
Right. So I want to take you guys and show you a video I saw this week. Thought it was interesting. Found this on TikTok, and let me see what you guys think about this.
All right.
Ever seen a shingle that lasts a lifetime? This is Owens Corning 50-year true duration shingle, designed to withstand anything you throw at it. This will be the last shingle you ever need. If you need a roof that lasts a lifetime, give us a call today.
All right.
So a little bit interesting. Like I've installed Owens Corning, love them. Great, make a great shingle.
Yeah, great product.
Anything you throw at it, not necessarily. We've got a hail cannon. I can say there's not a shingle on the market that anything you throw at it, it's going to last a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I would even argue some of your synthetic products that are out that are damage proof or not actually damage proof.
Sure. When
it gets to a certain extent.
Sure. Yeah, I just thought that was funny that especially for a shingle, I could see if you were doing like a super robust synthetic or something that trying to make that claim, but just going, hey, this asphalt shingle is going to last you the rest of your life. And that actually is a company out of Houston, which gets hailstorms. It's super hot, super humid.
I was going to say, it's not
windy,
even an impact resistant shingle or anything.
Well,
when they make their duration storm, which is impact resistant, but
there's no governance to the use of terms.
Right.
So let's start there.
Yeah, sure.
It's like saying you have the world's greatest hot dog stand, right? There's nobody in the world making the world championship of hot dog stands. It's
my mother told me I was the best. So
yeah, exactly. So there's nothing that stops these companies from saying lifetime shingle, lifetime guarantee, lifetime warranty, and then somewhere.
But they've got to know.
Well, they do know.
Yeah.
But it's selling to the consumer, right? It's selling it for $2.99 instead of $3. It's the methodology behind it.
Sure.
So anybody who lives in the Houston market or Texas in general, because they get hammered. It's like living in Denver or Tulsa. A handful of these cities just get smoked all the time. They know that every few years they run the risk of having to replace their stuff. Right. And they know that every few years they run the risk of Texas specifically being a percentage-based dedeductible when it comes to hail.
Right. That's not $1,000 deductible. That's a $8,000 deductible or whatever.
Cool. It used to be 30-year, used to be the lifetime. Now it's, actually before that it was 50-year, right. And then they went to 40, and then they reduced back to 30. Now apparently we're going back up to 50. The year's irrelevant, right? It's the extent and the damage that the storm causes, but they want to buy something that is going to at least reduce the possibility of them having to replace their roof for an $8,000 deductible again in 2 years.
Yep.
Right. When I was roofing in Dallas, we had repeat clients every year. They'd call and be like, "Hey, we got hit again." We're like, "Okay, we'll come back out and do it." And every year it was $3,000 to $5,000, $8,000, some of them even larger deductibles. So, that's part of the problem though too, is these people, they buy stuff. It's like a limited powertrain warranty or whatever on your car. Like you don't know what the hell it means. You just know that it sounds fancy. And if I buy this thing,
when you go to use it, they're going to go, "Oh no."
Yeah.
Because of this technicality.
Yeah.
I was having that conversation with a contractor last week. They were like, "We do a lifetime workmanship warranty." And I was like, "Why?" If it's going to be a workmanship issue, it's within the first couple years anyway.
Well, and that's why they do it, is because
no, I get it, but
really
again,
they're not really doing much different between a 2-year warranty and a 20-year warranty.
Yeah. No, I know. It's a weird thing to say. Be like, what if on the fluke chance you get that one old timer who still, hand balances his checkbook, and he's like, "My roof 25 years ago was done by," and they go and they call you, "You're going to go out and fix it?" And he's like, "Yeah,
well, no, you're going to go out there and find the technicality. Hey, you had a windstorm, you had a hailstorm. Yeah. That's the whole point that I think, to your point about like their messaging to consumers is the consumers go, "Oh wow, these guys really stand behind their product."
Yeah.
When really it's like, I just want to be the guy that comes out to look at this 10 years from now when it starts leaking, so I can go, "Hey, this is wind damage, not poor workmanship.
Yep.
Let's file another claim. Let's sell you another roof."
Yep. Yeah,
Correct.
How are you going to prove workmanship 10 years from now? Good luck.
Yeah.
Right, 100%. Well, and we all know sitting in these chairs that if a leak pops up 10 years later, it was probably not a workmanship related issue. It would have shown up a lot sooner. And I normally will tell our clients that, hey, we provide a written 5-year workmanship warranty, because I've worked with other companies that they tell you until they're blue in the face that they have this workmanship warranty, but there's nothing that actually exchanges hands to be able to hold the company accountable. But I'll usually say, hey, we shoot to do everything perfect, but in the event that there's an issue with the workmanship, you're going to notice after the first rainstorm typically. If we miss some flashing or something somewhere, if we missed something, it's normally going to rear its ugly head pretty quickly and not years and years and years down the road. But even with that video, is homeowners need to be educated on what those warranties actually cover, and what does a lifetime warranty even mean, and what are some of the specifics inside of that, because those manufacturers are only going to protect against a defect in the actual production of that product.
Right.
Any sort of manufacturing defects. But if the contractor deviates from the installation instructions that caused that sort of issue to happen, then the manufacturer has an out to not worry about covering.
There are manufacturers that deal with that better than others. Right.
There are. Yeah.
And vetting those is super important too, to know that you're working with the right manufacturer.
But think about this: if you find a manufacturer warranty on a shingle, right, and it gets submitted, and the manufacturer agrees that this is an issue, they have to then go back and find all the rest of the ones that are found in that lot, and at least investigate whether there's other issues on 500 other homes.
Yeah, so it's not just a $20,000 problem.
It's not just and that's the issue with manufacturer warranties, is they're not interested in doing that either. But in the event that there's something that's legit, it's just like medicine. They get one bad lot of pills, they go back and have to
pull everything.
The same thing has to happen, right? If there's a bad lot, they have to go back to that lot, and that's why they break them up into smaller lots all the time too, so they can separate those. But still,
that makes sense.
Still, it's not just your house, right? They have to go back, and the investigation process has to be initiated on all of that. Wow. So that's something we don't ever take into consideration, though.
Right?
Either.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, a lot of the times with those manufacturing defects, it ends up being, you know, at least in my experience, it might just be like a seam where they had resecured the fiberglass mat or something like that, and so there's a little strip. But a lot of those you can even see when they come out of the bundle, or oh, this shingle's not any good, let me get rid of it. Correct. So, you know, making sure that your crew is trained appropriately to install the way that particular manufacturer wants to see it done. But what are y'all's thoughts on contractors doing a video like that about, you know, ultimately kind of selling that this shingle is going to last a lot longer than it actually does? Because in Middle Tennessee, I mean, 15 to 18 years, those asphalt shingles are getting near the end of their life, and they're probably going to end up in some sort of insurance claim around that time. But what are y'all's thoughts on that?
I think it's a terrible idea to say this is the last roof that you're ever going to need. Like, he went really hard into, like, you know, you are never going to need another roof because you got this shingle, and it's going to stand up to everything. When, especially in a market like Houston, it's 1 in a million that roof is going to last more than 15 years. And even then, it's probably like 4. But
I can appreciate the salesmanship in it, right? Like, that kid just wants to go out and sell some roofs.
Sure.
I'm not mad at that, but my hope is that, and it's probably not this way, but my hope would be that he's, or the company that he's working for, is educated enough to be able to have intelligent conversations about why.
Right. Yeah. Right? Before the contract is signed.
Yeah.
Well, and like, I don't want to like hate on this guy too much. Like, I've done way dumber stuff than that.
Oh, big time.
And so, you know, I can sit here and point at him and go, hey, that's a terrible idea. But at the same time, I've done things that are a terrible idea. So I don't necessarily think he's like maliciously like trying to trick somebody.
And that's important. Though, right?
Maybe he is, but I don't know the guy. So, you know, hopefully he's just, you know, he's good at TikTok and started selling roofs last month, and thought, hey, let's throw this together.
We know plenty of guys in our industry who are good at TikTok and good at nothing else.
Sure.
Sure. That's a fact. Well, and really kudos to that guy. There was a good video, you know, as far as the editing. It was a well put together video. But I'm with you. You know, I mean, providing a little bit more factual information, or hey, this is a top tier product when we're discussing asphalt shingles, or something like that, or some of the advantages of using that duration with the Sure Nail strip, and you know how it provides a little bit of extra security when that roof's being installed, that those nails are being put in the proper locations and things like that.
Sell the benefits that are true.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. Yep. I mean, I feel like you do have some responsibility if you're the expert, that I'm selling you this thing that, you know, even a new sales guy should know more than your random homeowner, right? Like, you start to have some kind of responsibility of like, let's not.
But again, it goes back to education, right? I mean, when I first started selling roofs, I couldn't tell you the difference between a 3-tab and a 30-year.
Yeah.
And the first roof I ever sold, I remember going into the office with the contract. I was pumped. I handed in. They're like, "What kind of shingle was it?" I'm like, "It was gray."
Yeah.
They're like, nice. Yeah, but was it a 3-tab? Was it a laminate? Was it?
I don't even know what those are.
It was gray. It looked like the rest of them in that neighborhood.
Yeah. I don't see colors really well. Like, I'm not like technically colorblind, but like I'm not, you know, just not really great at it. And so I would always have homeowners that are like, well, what do you think? Which color should we get? And like, I was just like, weathered wood. Like, weathered wood is what you want. It matches everything. Let's go.
Yep.
Sign here, press hard, 3 copies.
Yep.
So I want to take our conversation somewhere a little bit different. The problem that I've been seeing in a lot of our Facebook groups and a lot of even contractors that we've done training with is the attempt to repair video, the attempt to repair strategy with roof repairability. and guys are getting stuck on it. There's all these crazy, complicated schemes of trying to position yourself and trying to, get claims pushed through, using what a lot of times is what the adjuster's asking them to do. Hey, do an attempt to repair video, so we can review that and see if this is repairable, and then maybe we'll change our scope from 3 shingles to a slope or a roof or whatever it is. And I see people continually struggle with that, and they keep falling into what I think is a trap. But I wanted to get your guys' take on attempt to repair, repairability, doing the repairability assessment method that we talk about.
Yep.
What are you seeing?
So on my end, contractors 100% need to just understand that the carriers are going to be going repair over replace 9 times out of 10. They're going to go that route. They're going to try and find, and I'm convinced that they may even prey on some of the ignorance, or hey, let's go for repair at first, and if they fight us and they can prove that more material needs to be included, then we'll go from there. But I think the days of
when they've run the numbers, they know that 9 times out of 10,
right,
they're either going to do the repair, or I've even seen where homeowners just throw their hands up and go, okay, well, we got our $1,000 over our deductible. We're going to do nothing. And then now we don't have coverage 2 years from now when we get hit with a storm.
Correct. And then so, when they do come back with, doing a repair, I personally don't care if that material is no longer made or anything like that. We need to get the coverage opened first, and then listen and read and decipher what the carrier's actually asking us to do. Because if they say we're going to do a repair on this, then okay, great. What materials would you like me to use? What type of tools would you like to see done in the event that I'm attempting to perform the prescribed repair, and I start noticing that it's causing damage to surrounding materials? Do you want me to go ahead and stop and tarp at that point? Do you want me to complete the repair and then document everything that's damaged and then tarp the area? Like, get some clarity on the front end. Like, how do you want me to go through and do this? Because when I don't do that, then no matter what I do, it's going to be the wrong way.
Right.
Or I lifted the shingles too far back, or I created more of that damage. So I want to get the expectations on the front end of what they would like to see, and then if their prescribed repair is in violation of some sort of building code, then I want to at least reference that and be like, hey, just so you're aware, this attempted repair violates the following building codes. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go out there and attempt that repair. I just want to make sure that I've outlined everything that's going on. And hey, even in the event that I can go through and successfully perform this repair, this particular slope does not meet these minimum requirements. And so, at a bare minimum, we would need to get this slope done. But I'm only hired to do the work that you guys have outlined, and so I'm going to do that to the best of my ability in a good faith attempt to do what's right by the policyholder. And then ultimately laying that foundation, knowing what the expectation is from the carrier, and then going out and doing that. And then I want to make sure that I'm documenting every bit of that. I'm showing an unopened bundle before I get there. I've got it at the house. I'm showing myself opening that bundle, because I know that carriers in the past have told me, like, hey, we don't know for sure that that shingle you used came from that bundle that you have on the roof. Like, there's a lot of different things that they'll claim to say.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that I check all of the boxes on my end and say, yes, Mr. Adjuster, no, Mr. Adjuster, like, and truly work towards a resolution and not be combative with them. And
are you seeing a lot of opposition when you try to get those specifics and go, hey, how do you want me to perform this? What tools do you want me to use? How do you want me to, ask all the questions to make sure, because that is like, they will, paint you in a corner if you don't do it exactly the way that they, after the fact, tell you that they wanted it. Are they supplying that information to you, or is that a difficult hurdle? Because it seems like that would be a major failure
Is
point
the
in
response
process.
usually, well, you're the contractor?
9 times out of 10, it is, well, you're the contractor. I do have.
Well, and that's an okay response
yep.
too, because it's like, all right, well, you're telling me I can decide. So now you can't go later and tell me
Yep.
I had to use the roof snake because you told me I could use whatever tools I want.
Right.
To.
Yeah. I ultimately, for me personally, I want to volley and put the ball back over in their court. And then if they do defer to me being the expert, then I will outline, cool, this is how the proper methodology will go. And in the event this begins to happen, I will document that, cease the repair attempt, tarp that area, and I'll submit that into you for review. Is that fair enough? Or something like that. But if they do go through and say, yes, we need you to use this particular tool, this particular hammer, this roof snake, or whatever, if I'm not sold on their methodology behind that, I'll express that, but then I'll typically end it with, but I will go through and attempt to do it the way that you want to, but for clarification, if I notice this or this or this, how would you like me to go through and proceed? Right. So majority of the time they defer to me, but then I want to make sure that I let them know what I'm going to do, and then how the process needs to work. If they're going to defer to me being the expert, then I need to step into that and be that.
So then the other side of that, I think, is the coverage side of oftentimes the repairability. They're going to go, well, we only owe for damaged materials, right? And
yeah, which find me a policy that says exactly that.
Yeah,
without some language on the front end or the back end that creates a conversation. There's 3 things that are really, really important in this conversation from a PA's perspective. The first is, can you warranty the roof after the repair?
Yeah.
Most of the time you can't, because you can only warranty that space that you touched, right? I'm no longer going to warranty the whole roof because I only touched this space. The second thing is, if you're telling me from the carrier's perspective how you want me to do this, my response, because I'm a credential guy, show me your credentials that say that you know that you're licensed to do this, that you've been educated on, because that's what you're expecting out of me, right? So if you can't show those to me, how do you get to dictate how I do a repair, right? And then the third is the method of repair that they're telling you to do put your license in jeopardy? Because if you're actively not following a code that is accepted across the country, you are putting your license potentially at risk. So if you can't answer all 3 of those very confidently, it's a different conversation.
The other aspect of it is, if you do violate that code and you go perform this repair and it fails catastrophically,
who's responsible?
Who's responsible? And is your insurance now going to cover it when you knowingly violated code in what you were doing?
Right.
Now, is that an email?
And I don't know the answer to that.
Is that potentially an email that contractors could send over to their GL company and just be like, hey, I just have a question. If I go through and attempt a repair and the material is not repairable to work with, and I decide to just proceed anyways, and that repair fails, causes interior leaking, and we have a $10,000 claim get filed against our general liability or whatever, whatever the number is, who's responsible? You know, and I almost guarantee your GL provider is going to say, you're required to perform the work according to the applicable building codes or something that, you know.
But those conversations don't come up because everybody wants to just die on the hill of like, well, I saw this YouTube video of this guy doing this thing and it worked for him and I'm going to just follow suit. We've gotten adjusters removed off of claims because they submitted Xactimates and they don't have a certification. We've gotten adjusters removed off of files because they're working a claim in Texas but they're licensed in New York. Like,
that's so common.
It's important to understand who you're talking to. Right? And so at the point that somebody says, well, you're the expert, okay, then I'm going to show you by way of code why this doesn't work, or by way of the licensure requirements for whatever, that this isn't going to work. Also that I can't warranty it. So, and then additionally, are you paying me for my time? Right? Because if you're asking me to do some sort of destructive testing or any sort of like mechanical work, are you compensating me for my time? Because I'm expensive. Right? And so, but everybody finds that one little nugget and they just want to die on that hill. There's a bunch of different ways to attack it legitimately that are not cyclic like our industry is, where it's every couple of years somebody has this great idea that everybody should follow suit, and it works for a period of time. There are technical and legal specifications that warrant a further conversation in a lot of these cases.
Yeah. Well, I think with what you're doing, and hey, let's define how we're going to do this. Let's make sure we're all on the same page of how this is going to go. And you kind of paint the carrier into a corner where they have to cover it because they've committed to these things. Hey, if we look at this, then yes, we'll do this if it fails. But you get into the reason, I would say the biggest reason that I call it a trap is they go, well, you were too aggressive with it, or well, you just want this whole roof, and so you wanted to make it fail. Your calculations are not our calculations. Our position stands, right? So I look a lot of times for just your regular residential roofing, like where the trends are going. And if you look at it, the commercial roofing and the multifamily roofing is usually leading that way, right? Like we're seeing the standard for proving the loss and the documentation rising on the residential side. It's getting denied unless you provide the right documentation. More and more so. And on the like multifamily side, which is where the biggest asphalt shingle projects typically are, is they are denying things, and they have been for years, and so the documentation has to be there. But rather than saying, hey, we're just going to try to repair it and video it and give you the stuff, and we'll do it the way you asked us to, and then now you're caught in that cycle of saying, all right, we are going to take a prescribed process. We're going to have a third party do it who's getting paid the same whether it passes or fails. We're going to document everything, and then you're going to have to justify why you're not paying this when we've provided the most legitimate, fair way of assessing whether or not this thing is repairable. And if you're going to ignore that, that might be the thing that comes up in litigation, or What are your thoughts? You're huffing at me. What are your thoughts on that?
Determining the repairability of a roof in part or in whole are two different conversations.
Sure.
So the carrier is only responsible to put you back to pre-loss condition. The reason that they push back so hard on repairability is because they know if they agree to the front slope of the house can't be repaired and they need to replace that slope, that the contractor is going to say, oh, well, the underlayment's got to go over the hip and the ridge and blah, 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 right? And all of a sudden we're having an argument over a whole roof. It's the same set of guys that is doing well, if I can, you know what, that is repairable to your point earlier. And then when it's an insurance claim, all of a sudden it's not repairable, right? And it's a little more apt to be done on a retail side, because the carrier knows if they commit to that, then they're committing to a slope. If they commit to a slope, then they're committing to the whole roof.
Right.
And they know, because the way that policies are interpreted, not insurance policies, like state regulated policies and statutes, the way that they're interpreted, line of sight and matching and all this other stuff, they know that the contractor base knows these things and is going to use every one of those things to get that entire roof bought. Unfortunately, not all the time does the entire roof need to be bought.
Sure.
It's the easy way. It's the path of least resistance for salesmen and roofing companies to get, because if a roof gets bought, then they can get gutters and they can get siding and they can get windows and all the other things, because the roof is the big, primarily the heaviest portion of an insurance claim. But I think, again, it goes back to the education side of going, sometimes a roof just doesn't need to be replaced. You can repair that slope. You can repair some of these things. Well, again, I agree that by building code and underlayment going over certain areas and how ice and water shields installed,
all those technicalities,
it doesn't necessarily mean that it always has to be that way.
Sure.
Right.
Well, that's when
but it goes back to my warranty, and can you warranty it? Does it put your license at risk? Like, if you can check those boxes and still do a repair or a slope, that's important. But the idea, I get why carriers push back on stuff so much, because they're getting bulldogged into paying for a bunch of shit that doesn't need to be paid for.
Well, and I would even argue too that a lot of these contractors, and there's some consultants out there that teach it in our industry as well, about kind of baby stepping it through and just not going at like, hey, the entire roof needs to be replaced. like the carrier doesn't know that that's going to be the route that
Yeah, they don't see
contractor's
the
trying
pattern.
to
Yeah,
take.
yeah.
You know, like we know the games that the carriers are going to play. The carriers know what the contractors are going to do. You know, you can't surprise a carrier or, you know, work it through and then they're like, man, they got me. Like they knew it was coming the whole time.
Right.
You know, when you're going through on the repairability side of things. So, you know, I always want to make sure that that's laid out on the front end of, you know, in the full loss assessment report that, you know, due to XYZ, the entire assembly has been affected and, you know, will need to be replaced. And then how we get there is going to just be the conversation that we have with the homeowner and the carrier so that we can make sure everything is done appropriately. But we're not surprising these carriers with the way that we work these claims. They know the games, if you want to call them that or tactics that are being taught and trained inside of the roofing industry.
In terms of tactics, I think you can get there either way, right? Like you're not going to trick them, right? They
Right.
see it coming, but also there's sometimes no way that they can stop it, right? If the facts line up
Yep.
with this roof truly is not repairable because of X, Y, and Z,
Yep.
and we can prove it, and we can go round and round and readjustment and all that sort of stuff
Yep.
to finally get there, I think you can go that route. And that's where the majority of our industry is going. And I've always been like, if everybody's zig, you want to zag, right? And if you look at the majority of the industry does that because it requires very little on the front end. It's just, hey, Mr. Homeowner, you're missing some shingles. Call 1-800-CARRIER and they're going to, you know, file a claim and we're good to go. And then 6 months of back and forth and wasting time and running back out to the house, as opposed to just going, hey, let's assess whether or not this is repairable. Let's go through the steps. Let's document everything. Let's put it all together.
Yep.
And then, and let's present to the carrier, yes, this is a full roof. Right? Just be honest about it. If it is what it is.
Yep.
And show your work, show all the documentation, as opposed to, you know, it's the, like, kind of the lazy way of going, hey, let's just get into this, and then hopefully it works out. Well, less and less often is it just like getting approved for you right out of the
Correct.
gate. And you're setting yourself up for all this needless work. You know, so being in training, I get to see, like, you know, the guys that are doing it really well, the guys that are struggling, that, you know.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of
uh,
the guys that are struggling with it right now are the ones that are like, insurance is dead, we're going all retail.
Yeah.
Just because they don't want to learn the steps that it's going to take to go through and facilitate insurance claims now. But I'm glad you said something about, you know, dragging claims out, because I'm convinced that the carriers, when they know that they can get a contractor on the hook to play their game, and they know that it's like a big red where, you know, I've got 2 years from data loss to recoup my, you know, full replacement cost benefits, but only a year to file suit, and we're 7 months after the date of loss, and so the carrier knows I've
can
only
drag
got to
this thing out
distract
more
this
fun.
contractor for 5 months. Easy. And
Yeah.
they'll get sucked into it every time. So if contractors aren't educated on different sort of like statutes of limitations for homeowners to be able to go legal if they need to, then those are things that they need to know, because there's contractors left and right that are getting these claims drug out to the point where their homeowners can't go legal if they want to.
Well, and just so we're clear on that, so nobody's unintentionally violating UPPA, that's not for the contractor to argue. It's knowing when those lines
For
are.
sure. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It's then bringing in a PA or a lawyer,
Yep.
because how are you supposed to know without interpreting the policy, right? And that's a really weird line to walk. But, you know, it's a good segue, because I was going to ask you this anyway. So without being able to interpret policy, how important is that repairability assessment to you if you have no idea if the homeowner has an ACV policy or a policy with a roof payment schedule or a policy with all these different variables? How important is that repairability? How important, and it's not so much the technical side of the repairability,
Yeah.
how important is you getting that roof bought? Because so more often than not, especially after big hailstorms, at least on the PA side, we hear, well, we've got every other roof on this block bought. Okay, well, what kind of shingles does everybody have?
That is the worst argument.
I can't
Because if
stand
somebody
that
has the
one.
shingle that kid was pitching, their roof's not getting bought, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, so just because these 3 houses on this block you got bought and they're all 3 Allstate does not mean they were all built at the same time, that they had
Right.
the same shingle, that they hadn't, like
Ventilation,
so
everything.
when you have that variable and then add in the potential variables that exist within a policy,
Yep.
how willing to die on that hill are you for that repairability
Well,
for
I
that
think
one roof?
going back to the like, is this all of a sudden repairable if it's a retail deal?
Right.
Right. Like if you look at it and just go, I'm going to do what's right, no matter who's paying the bill, and just handle it fairly, and just go, hey, this roof is not repairable because of X, Y, Z. Maybe your insurance your policy covers that. Maybe it doesn't. I don't
Right.
know. This is what it would cost for me to do your repairs properly, which would be a full replacement or whatever the scope is. I think that's kind of how you have to handle it. And I have had, like after a hailstorm in like a cookie cutter neighborhood, like every one of these roofs is exactly the same,
Yeah.
but they've been replaced, over the years. And I literally had 5 houses in a row that I sold every one of them, or had the opportunity to sell every
Right.
one of them. The middle one out of those 5, not a bit of damage.
Yeah.
Happens.
And the rest of them smoked, all got bought. And so like, I hate that argument where they go, oh, well, this guy's unfair because he, we're doing all these other houses in the area. So what? Like,
Well, and then they get the homeowner on their side
prove
too.
the damage on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's not proof of it. Maybe that is. I've seen, you see videos of like cars getting smashed or whatever. This one got smashed and this one didn't. Obviously hail isn't quite like that, but I have seen like multifamily where I've done inspections where part of the complex got hit, part of it got hit none.
Yep.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
you have to look at it honestly, whether it's the repairability or
Right.
just the damage in general.
But another important part of all this too is that for a carrier to deny coverage, if we're talking specifically on the insurance side, for a carrier to deny coverage, they have to show the homeowner the policy language that supports their denial.
Yeah.
If you don't have a additional representative in there, it doesn't matter what they say, because they'll just come back and be like, well, we stand by you said it earlier, we stand by the way that we agree
Our
to
position.
yeah. And it's like, yeah, but the policy language has to support that. So as a PA or as a lawyer, you're going to go, well, show me in the policy where it says that you disagree with me based on that. You guys can't say that. Right. Well, contractors can't, consultants can sometimes, but it's questionable. But there's that argument too. It's like, well, cool. Like when they're wrong, right? When that they're acting not necessarily in good faith, you can't ask certain questions because you're the contractor and you can't live in both worlds.
Yeah.
So
How should a contractor approach that? So let's say I'm a contractor. I go out and I perform a good faith repairability attempt. How should a contractor, if they come back and say our position still stands, how does a contractor get the homeowner to reach out?
So
Kind of in an abbreviated.
yeah, short answer to that is it's going to be state specific.
Okay.
Because you are starting to teeter in. If let's assume that it's complete crap, right? Like they're denying it based off of what everybody in their right mind would agree that should be replaced. There are bad faith indicators for every state, and each one they varies, right? Like Indiana has 3. Texas has like 27 different things, right? So it's hard to say. Generally, though, we tell people, like, if it gets denied, like a flat out denial, and you're confident that it should be bought, bring in a PA or a lawyer. The problem is, and I saw a post the other day, somebody I have a decent amount of respect for. I haven't known him long enough to be like, oh, I really, really, really respect this dude, but everything I've seen is pretty spot on. He was making a comment about the appraisal process because in a lot of states you don't have to be a licensed PA or a lawyer to do appraisals. And the overuse of the appraisal process by people who are not willing to go get licensed has kind of bastardized that. But usually that stems from a repairability because there's a general idea that policy, if you open coverage, you can go to appraisal, right? And then certain states dictate it differently, but that's not accurate. Every policy is different in how how you can incite the appraisal clause. But there's just such a there's two things going on. There's a lack of education, and then there's I got burned by this PA or this lawyer one time, so I'm never using anyone ever again. And it's like, okay, well,
there are bad PAs,
you
there
got
are bad
divorced.
lawyers, right? Like,
And
you got
contractors
divorced
and
once.
carriers,
It didn't mean that you were no longer dating women, right? Like you can still go down that road and find somebody good and find somebody who's going to advocate for you and the insureds that you're working with. But if you just are so set in your ways, that's just what it's going to be, unfortunately.
And I think, being a contractor and not a PA, like if there was ever something that I thought was, hey, I think this kind of smells like bad faith, like I'm not even going to mention that to the homeowner. Like I was taught, like, don't even use those words. I know contractors do.
Yeah, don't ever use the word bad faith.
Maybe it is, but that's where I would go, all right, I think we should have a professional look at this who can interpret your policy and see what's going on here. And then, even having PAs that maybe you send some work to, they don't necessarily have to take this one if they just go, yeah, that's bad faith, you need to get with an attorney. I hate the aspect of like PAs and attorneys both bolting on their fee. I know it does happen sometimes, and sometimes it's kind of a necessity. But I really respect when PAs can go, hey, from the rip here, I spent 10 minutes looking over this situation. You don't need me. You need an attorney.
Or you don't need me at all, right? Our firm,
right, or you don't need
our
me.
firm does
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Where I'm like, hey, if I just need to draft an email or help the homeowner send an email, we don't charge for it.
Right.
And every case has a different line in the sand where you're like, okay, nah. But I mean, we've got a couple in Colorado that we've worked where it's like, I say we've worked them. We've helped the homeowner write emails for a month straight, and then we go, okay, we're going to do one more email, and if this doesn't, if it doesn't,
then we need to get in business.
Then we'll go. But we don't want to charge people if all we had to do is send a couple emails and case closed, right? But I think, to your point, there are a lot of those guys who are just like that. I got to capture my fee. And it's like,
capture your fee when you earn it. And,
do enough claims that you can, like, don't be the roofing salesman who's like, oh, I got to pay my gas bill this week.
Right.
I'm going to sell that.
Make
roof.
something out of nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up that section here, but one piece that I wanted to do on this show here each time is looking at a tool. And this is not a paid endorsement. Maybe they'll send me another one because mine is actually kind of dirty. But I ran into these guys at IRE last year. I looked at these for a while, and I actually didn't buy one for a long time because I was like, man, that's kind of expensive. They come out of Australia, the Lockjaw ladder grip. Have either of you ever used these?
I have seen one, never personally used it. I'm still a bungee to the gutter
I prefer to just fall off
type
the roof.
guy.
That's one way to go with it.
Or not climb them.
Being a bigger guy, I'm, I think, 260 right now.
Look good.
Getting on roofs. And, the smaller you are, the more nimble, easy that is to manage. But the transition on and off of the ladder is always the sketchiest part, especially you're on a 2-3 story roof. Making that transition is always I don't want to slip right there because then I'm off the roof. I don't even have a chance to grab a hold of something. But I finally got one. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and spend the money and get it. And it is such a game changer. So here, I'll let you play with that. So it only works with certain types of ladders. So if you have like a extension ladder or even like a
telescoping?
No,
or
not a telescoping. So it won't work with a telescoping. It'll work with like a little giant. It'll work with the
gorilla ladders or whatever.
A extension ladder. And then you also have to have a gutter. So if you don't have a gutter or you have a telescoping ladder, it's not going to work for you. But if you're using an extension ladder, which I think real roofers should use,
you should at least have one.
That's kind of my opinion. You should at least have one.
Yeah.
Maybe not the only thing that you use, but it makes it so secure. So it clamps onto the gutter right here, and then this thing is clamped onto the.
That's right.
The ladder.
Got it.
So you get like one side of your ladder there, and you clamp this onto the gutter, and it locks on. You're supposed to, I think they show like firemen using it and stuff, and they use two, so they've got it on either sides.
Yeah.
With one on there is no way you're getting that ladder off.
And Unless the
aside
gutter-
from like pulling the gutter off
I
of
was
the
saying
house.
unless the gutter fails, because that's it too, right? Like how many times you've gotten up there and it's a 5-inch gutter aluminum, and you're like,
It's got the ferrules and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
all rotted out anyway.
yeah.
As you're climbing up the ladder, you're like, oh shit.
Or you see it,
Holds.
collapsing in towards the.
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
You're like,
So
I need to-
there is that, but even so, like, it's just so much more secure. And so I know, like, if I were to slip and fall on the roof and I'm coming towards that ladder, I could grab the ladder and
Oh,
take my whole weight, like with force. There's no way that thing's going anywhere. And so I don't mess,
we used to always have the guys who use the what are they called, the clamps, the metal ones,
like a C-clamp.
no, like they're like pliers, but they lock.
Oh, like
vice
vice
grips.
grips.
Jesus, thank you. I don't know
Yeah.
why I was drawing such a blank on that.
PAs.
But they would have 2 of those that they carried up on their tool belt, and that's how they'd clip to the
Does
gutters.
it damage the gutter though?
Oh yeah, it does.
I figured it would.
But again, it's like we were going through some of those pictures earlier. It's like somebody did that knowing that nobody's ever climbing up that roof,
Yeah.
right?
Right, yeah.
It's nobody's ever going to be on that particular spot on the gutter, so that
Yeah.
they'll see that I've scuffed the crap out of it. Like
Yeah.
those are
yeah.
cool.
So those don't damage anything. So I recommend those to people anytime I get a chance.
I'm a proponent for all safety shit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I was gonna say at the end of the day, like we've got families. There's people that care about us. There's people that love us, and the work that we do can be dangerous. And so anything that we can do to make sure that we go home at night to our families, that should be a priority over money.
Yeah. So there's an alternative to this. I saw actually at IRE last year as well. There's a company that makes something somewhat similar, but it'll clip onto the shingle edge.
Oh.
So when you don't have a gutter, you can use that thing
Okay.
instead. And I think there's a way that you can connect it to the gutter. So they're kind of trying to sell it as like it replaces this and it works when there's no gutter. But
What about when contractors drive their nails through the shingles and they have their guns turned up too high?
can't do anything for that.
Just get some silicone. It'll be fine.
There we
yeah,
go.
yeah. Little caulk.
Nice.
Silicone
Caulk and
fixes
paint.
everything.
Yeah.
Make a roof for what he ain't. Thanks for watching today's episode. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel and share this with a colleague who could benefit from the information we shared. While you're at it, check out the Building Experts Institute for even more in-depth, expert-led training on the technical aspects of roofing and insurance restoration. We'll see you in the next episode.